My husband texted, I want to divorce all communication through my lawyer. I replied, understood. I am Emma, 32 years old, a high school English teacher in Austin, Texas. My husband David is 35, an accountant who loves order, precision, and schedules. We have been married for 6 years, together for almost 9. Our lives look perfect on the outside. We had a home in the suburbs, 2 cars, weekend brunches with friends. But behind the polite smiles, there was distance, the kind that grows quietly until it swallows everything. The first signs came months before that message. He started working late, saying clients needed him. He became protective of his phone, stepping out of the room to take calls. I noticed the small changes, how he stopped asking about my day, how he stopped saying goodnight, how our shared bed felt colder on his side. When I asked what was wrong, he said I was imagining things. When I brought up counseling, he said I was making problems out of nothing. I believed him because denial was easier than heartbreak. I'm not the type of woman who gives up easily. I thought love was built on patience, on understanding, on pushing through. So I cooked his favorite meals, left him little notes in his briefcase, tried to remind him of what we once were. But love cannot survive alone. I was holding the pieces while he was already walking away. That Friday evening, we had plans to meet after his office happy hour. I spent extra time getting ready, wearing the same navy dress he had complimented years ago. I even booked a table at the Italian restaurant where he first told me he loved me. I sat by the window, the soft jazz music playing while waiters passed by with wine glasses. I checked my phone every few minutes, convincing myself traffic was the reason he was late. I waited 1 hour, then 2. The restaurant began to empty. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger pretending to believe in something that was already gone. At exactly 9:37 p.m., my phone buzzed. One notification, one message that ended everything. I want a divorce. All communication through my lawyer. The world didn't shatter. It simply stopped. My throat tightened, but no tears came. I read it again, hoping the words would change. They didn't. I paid for the untouched meal, thanked the waiter with a trembling voice, and walked out into the humid Austin night. The streets buzzed with laughter and music, but inside I felt nothing. Driving home, my hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Every traffic light felt like a test of control. When I reached our apartment, his car wasn't there. His shoes were gone. His closet half empty. On the nightstand, the photo from our wedding was missing. The space where it used to sit looked like a wound. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at my phone. My fingers hovered over the call button. But what would I say? That I didn't understand? That I deserved more than a text? Instead, I placed the phone down and let the silence speak. The clock ticked past midnight as the weight of it all sank in. He hadn't acted on impulse. This was planned, calculated, executed like a business decision. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the room, exposing everything he left behind. An empty coffee mug, a wrinkled shirt, the faint smell of his cologne on the pillow. My inbox held an email from his lawyer dated 2 days earlier. He had arranged everything before sending that message. My marriage had been over while I was still choosing dinner reservations. I went to work anyway. My students had an essay exam on Shakespeare. I stood before them, explaining betrayal and loyalty like it was just literature. But the words cut deeper now. During lunch break, I sat in my car, scrolling through old pictures of us, smiling in places that now felt foreign. The girl in those photos looked naive, unaware of how love can end quietly through a screen. That evening, I drove downtown near his office, not to confront him, but to see him one last time. Through the glass walls of a restaurant, I saw him sitting with a woman. She was the same one I noticed in his work photos, always too close in the background. They were laughing, leaning in, her hand on his. My heart didn't break this time. It hardened. I turned the car around, rolled down the windows, and let the wind dry the tears I didn't know were falling. Back home, I took off my wedding ring and placed it in a drawer. I opened a blank notebook and wrote 3 words. He is gone. That was the first night I slept without checking my phone. The silence that once felt suffocating now sounded like peace trying to return. For the first time in months, I breathed without waiting for an explanation that would never come. I called him once, and it went straight to voicemail. I tried again, and it did the same. My chest felt heavy, the kind of pressure that makes breathing feel like effort. I sat there staring at the phone, waiting for the sound of a callback that never came. Something inside me already knew this was final, but denial has a way of pretending it still has a chance. I opened Facebook out of habit, and that was when the truth hit harder than his text. His profile photo was gone, replaced by a blank gray circle. His relationship status read single. The word burned like a confirmation stamp on everything I had been avoiding. I didn't sleep that night. I kept pacing around the apartment, staring at his empty side of the bed, the dresser drawer half open where he used to keep his watches. Around dawn, I heard the sound of the mail slot. A letter from a law firm slid onto the floor. It was brief, emotionless, already signed by his attorney. Every line was written like a contract, not a goodbye. He had planned this for weeks, maybe months, preparing every step while still pretending to be my husband at home. I sat at the kitchen table, the divorce papers spread in front of me. My hands trembled as I read each paragraph, words like division of assets and property settlement twisting into blades. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just felt hollow, like someone had carved out my chest and left an echo where my heartbeat used to be. I made coffee but couldn't drink it. The smell reminded me of the mornings he used to kiss my forehead before leaving for work. I missed a ghost, not a man. By the afternoon, I couldn't take the uncertainty anymore. I needed answers, or at least the dignity of hearing him say why. I drove downtown to his office, every red light feeling like a test of willpower. My heart pounded as I parked in front of the glass building, polished and cold like the man he had become. I walked inside, the receptionist looking startled when she recognized me. Her polite smile faltered as I said, I needed to see David. Her voice dropped when she replied that he wasn't available. I looked past her desk toward the transparent wall of his office. And there he was, sitting across from a woman I'd met once at a company barbecue. She had been friendly that day, offering to refill my drink and laughing a little too loudly at his jokes. Now she sat where I used to sit, her hand resting on his forearm, her eyes locked on his like she had already claimed the place I was trying to protect. For a moment, time felt suspended. The noise of phones, printers, and footsteps disappeared. He looked up, saw me through the glass, and froze. Our eyes met, and everything I needed to know was right there in his expression. There was no shock, no remorse, no attempt to explain. Only a quiet acknowledgement, like he had been waiting for this moment and had already moved past it. My body refused to move at first. I wanted to scream, to ask how he could erase 6 years with a text. But the words stuck in my throat. I turned away, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor as I walked toward the exit. The receptionist called my name once, but I didn't stop. The sunlight outside felt too bright, too real. I reached my car and sat there gripping the steering wheel, my reflection trembling in the rearview mirror. Tears threatened, but never came. Instead, a strange calm washed over me. I realized that the silence he left me with wasn't punishment. It was truth. He had already shown me who he was. I had simply refused to believe it. That quiet drive home became my answer, and somewhere between the stoplights and the fading city skyline, I decided I would never beg a man to explain how he stopped loving me. The first few weeks felt endless. His lawyer kept sending emails filled with legal language and cold reminders about assets, furniture, and joint accounts. David himself never reached out. The silence between us became heavier than any argument could have been. Friends texted awkward words of comfort, unsure whether to say sorry or congratulations. I learned quickly that grief doesn't always follow death. Sometimes it comes when the person you love is still breathing, but no longer the same soul you married. I would wake up before sunrise, the side of the bed where he used to sleep untouched. I made coffee just to fill the air with something familiar, though it no longer tasted the same. For a while, I tried pretending he might call, that this was some strange phase we could recover from. But hope became exhausting, so I stopped waiting. I started getting out of bed earlier, lacing my running shoes, and jogging through the quiet streets of Austin before work. The sound of my feet hitting the pavement was steady, reliable, something I could control when everything else had fallen apart. I cleaned the apartment one Saturday and packed away every trace of him. The photos, the shirts he had left, the tie clip I gave him for our anniversary. Each item went into a cardboard box marked donations. I deleted his number from my phone and blocked him everywhere, not out of anger, but out of mercy for myself. I needed space to breathe again. A few weeks later, I met with my bank to open a new account. My hands shook as I signed the forms, but it was the first decision in months that felt entirely mine. I found a small apartment 10 minutes from a school where I teach. It wasn't much, but it had sunlight pouring through the windows and a quiet balcony where I could sit with my morning coffee. I painted the walls soft green, replaced the heavy curtains with linen ones, and filled the kitchen with plants. For the first time since the divorce began, the air didn't feel stale. The official papers arrived one Thursday afternoon in a thick envelope. I sat at the table and read every word before signing. My pen didn't tremble this time. I noticed something as I flipped through the documents. The title for the house, the one he had always called ours, was legally in my name. He must have forgotten that I had paid the down payment years earlier when we first bought it. His lawyer had marked it as joint property, but the deed said otherwise. When they questioned it, I simply replied that they should check the paperwork. A week later, my phone rang. His name flashed on the screen for the first time since the day he left. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice cracked when he asked if I had really kept the house. I said yes, then told him calmly that he got what he wanted, the divorce. Before he could reply, I hung up. The silence that followed wasn't painful anymore. It was powerful. That evening, I cooked dinner for myself. Grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and a glass of white wine. I played the old record he used to hate because he said it was too sad. As the melody filled the apartment, I realized it didn't sound sad anymore. It sounded alive. I sat on the couch with the windows open, the soft breeze carrying the scent of rain from outside, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. Days turned into weeks, and I started smiling again without forcing it. My students noticed. One of them even said I seemed lighter, happier. I told her that sometimes letting go is the bravest thing you can do, even when it feels like breaking. By the end of that month, I stopped counting how long it had been since his message. I had stopped waiting for closure, realizing I had already written it myself. The house, the quiet mornings, the laughter returning to my voice. These were the pieces of a life rebuilt from ruin. When I looked in the mirror one morning, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes weren't tired anymore. She wasn't waiting for anyone to save her. She had already saved herself. 6 months later, my life looked completely different, and I was grateful for every bit of it. The apartment that once felt temporary had become my sanctuary. I adopted a golden retriever from a nearby shelter and named him Cooper. He filled the silence with warmth, the kind of energy only a creature who knows rescue can bring. I painted the living room yellow, bright and soft, a color that made the mornings feel hopeful. I started taking photography classes on weekends, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the time for when my life revolved around someone else's schedule. The first morning of summer break, I stood by the window watching the sunlight bounce off the walls I had painted with my own hands. I brewed coffee, not for two, but just for myself, and it tasted better that way. I realized that the heaviness in my chest that used to accompany each morning was gone. In its place was a calm rhythm, a quiet joy that came from building a life that finally belonged entirely to me. David reached out once, a short text that arrived late one night. He wrote that he was sorry for how everything ended, that he had made mistakes, that his relationship after ours had fallen apart. He said he missed the peace of our home. I read it twice and put the phone down. There was nothing cruel about my silence. It was simply clarity. Sometimes peace isn't found in confrontation, but in choosing not to reopen a door that had already shut itself for good. That same week, I received the final court confirmation in the mail. The divorce was fully processed. I stood in the kitchen holding that paper, and instead of sadness, I felt relief. It was done. The chapter that had once defined me was officially over. I burned a candle, turned on music, and danced barefoot across the living room with Cooper wagging his tail beside me. Freedom didn't come with fireworks. It came with quiet acceptance. I began noticing the small things again. The smell of rain on pavement, the laughter of students in the hallway, the the taste of cold lemonade after long runs by the river. Every morning before school, I walked Cooper along the water, coffee in one hand, his leash in the other. The sunrise painted the Austin sky in streaks of orange and pink, and for the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what I had gained. On weekends, I took my camera downtown and captured the city I'd lived in for years but never really seen. Street musicians, morning joggers, couples laughing over breakfast. Each photo reminded me that life keeps moving even when we think it has stopped. I entered one of my photos in a local art exhibit, and when it got selected, I stood in that gallery surrounded by strangers, smiling quietly to myself. 6 months earlier, I had been a woman staring at a text that ended her marriage. Now I was someone standing under bright lights, sharing her perspective with the world. Sometimes, people tell me I seem stronger now. I don't think strength is the right word. It's not that I became tougher. It's that I became lighter. I stopped carrying what wasn't mine to hold. I stopped replaying conversations in my head or wondering if things could have been different. The truth is, some endings are not tragedies. They're transformations disguised as heartbreak. One afternoon after work, I drove past our old house out of curiosity. The curtains were different, the garden overgrown. For a second, it felt like watching a movie from another lifetime. I didn't feel anger or nostalgia, just gratitude. That house once felt like a cage built out of expectations. Now, it was someone else's story, and I was finally living mine. I started journaling again, not about pain, but about gratitude. Each night, I wrote one line about something good, no matter how small. A funny conversation with a student. The smell of new books in a library. Cooper falling asleep with his paw on my lap. Life had returned to its rhythm, and it was softer than before. The day I met friends for dinner to celebrate my new art exhibit, they asked if I had heard from David again. I smiled and shook my head. There was nothing left to hear. Closure doesn't come from an apology. It comes from realizing you don't need one. Now, when I lock the door each morning and step into the sunlight, I carry a peace that feels unbreakable. The air smells different. The world feels wider. I understand now that endings are not punishments but directions. My marriage didn't fail. It freed me. And that truth will always be the best reply I could have ever sent.